Amy Winehouse sold 7 million copies of one album. She won 5 Grammys in a single night. And by the time she died, most of her city couldn't remember the last time she seemed sober in public. She wrote about heartbreak like she'd invented it. She sang like she'd lived 100 years before she turned 20. And she died at 27, in a bed in Camden, with an alcohol level 5 times the legal driving limit. This is the story of how Amy Winehouse became the voice of a generation, and why nobody could save her from herself. Hi, I'm Umedo. I explore brilliant and flawed people and their work. And this is Amy Winehouse. Amy was born in 1983 in Southgate, North London. Her father drives a cab. Her mother is a pharmacist. Both sides of the family are Jewish, and music runs through the house early. Her father sings Sinatra around the flat. Her grandmother, Cynthia, is the family member Amy is closest to growing up. Cynthia had once dated the British jazz saxophonist Ronnie Scott, and she became one of the first people to actively encourage Amy's singing, taking her to jazz clubs and pushing her toward vocal lessons, before anyone else in the family treats music as more than a hobby. When Cynthia dies in 2006, not long before Back to Black is released, Amy writes that her grandmother's death is one of the hardest things she's ever gone through, and friends say it marks the beginning of a noticeably steeper decline in her drinking. At 9, Amy's parents separate. Her father moves out to be with another woman. Amy later says the divorce is the event that shapes everything that follows. Not because of one dramatic moment, but because her sense of stability disappears at the exact age she's starting to figure out who she is. Her mother raises Amy and her older brother largely on her own from that point. She's a difficult kid at school. She's expelled from one for piercing her nose, and generally refusing to follow rules that don't interest her. She's also, by her own account, bored constantly. She reads fast, gets restless in class, and finds most of what's taught in front of her irrelevant to what she actually wants to do. But she's already writing songs by 11, banging them out on a keyboard in her bedroom. And by 14, she's performing at open mics and small local shows. At 16, she enrolls at the Sylvia Young Theatre School, then gets kicked out of that too, reportedly for wearing a nose ring and not taking the uniform seriously. She transfers to the Brit School instead, the kind of place built for kids who are talented but allergic to structure. It's the same school that later produces Adele and Leona Lewis. At the Brit School, Amy studies alongside other future musicians, but she stands out immediately for her voice. A low, smoky alto that teachers say sounds decades older than her actual age. She's also, even then, writing constantly. Friends from this period describe her carrying notebooks everywhere, filling them with lyrics between classes, often finishing entire songs in a single sitting, rather than editing over weeks. Her early influences aren't the pop acts her classmates listen to. She grows up on Sarah Vaughan, Dinah Washington, and Thelonious Monk, artists her father plays around the house. And it's their phrasing, behind the beat, conversational, unhurried, that ends up defining her own singing style more than anything happening in contemporary British pop at the time. By 19, Amy has a manager, a record deal, and a debut album. Frank came out in 2003. It's jazz-inflected, lyrically sharp, and built almost entirely around her own writing, a rarity for a teenage pop signing, most of whom are handed songs by professional writers. Amy writes about her own relationships in blunt, specific language, down to real names and real arguments. Critics notice immediately. The album went platinum in the UK. She's nominated for the Mercury Prize. But even at this early stage, there are signs of what's coming. Amy drinks heavily on tour. She skips interviews, sometimes shows up late to her own shows, and tells journalists flatly that she doesn't enjoy fame, doesn't want the attention, and would rather be writing songs in private than performing them on stage in front of strangers. Then she meets Blake Fielder Civil. They met in a Camden pub in 2005. Blake works in the music video industry and the two fall into an on-and-off relationship that will define the next 6 years of Amy's life, publicly, romantically, and chemically. Friends later describe Blake as the person who introduced Amy to crack cocaine and heroin. Blake himself has admitted this in interviews, saying he takes responsibility for that part of her story. Amy and Blake break up not long after they get together. Blake goes back to a previous girlfriend, and Amy is left devastated. And out of that heartbreak, alone in her flat, she writes the album that makes her famous. Back to Black came out in 2006. It's built on the sound of 1960s girl groups, the Ronettes, the Shangri-Las, filtered through Amy's own voice, which by this point has deepened into something huskier, more lived in than the voice on Frank. The songs are almost all about Blake, about addiction, about refusing help, most explicitly on the title track and on Rehab, which becomes her signature song almost by accident. The album is enormous. It sells over 1 million copies in the UK alone, and goes on to sell more than 7 million worldwide. It won 5 Grammy Awards in 2008, including Record of the Year and Best New Artist, tying a record at the time for most Grammys won by a British female artist in a single night. She performs her acceptance via satellite from London. She's been denied a US visa over a prior drug arrest, so she watches her own historic night from a room in England, surrounded by her family, instead of the crowd in Los Angeles. Rehab, the album's lead single, becomes inescapable in a way few singles from a British jazz soul singer ever do. It tops charts, gets covered and sampled repeatedly, and turns a very specific, very personal refusal, Amy singing about her own label and her own father pushing her toward treatment she doesn't want, into a sing-along. The song's popularity creates an uncomfortable dynamic that follows Amy for the rest of her career. Audiences cheering the exact lyric that describes her declining to get help at the exact moment she actually needs it most. At the peak of her career in 2007, Amy married Blake. It's a fast, chaotic wedding in Miami. The two elope with barely any planning. And the marriage becomes one of the most publicly documented downward spirals in modern music. Paparazzi photographed the couple covered in cuts and bruises outside their flat at 4 a.m. Amy performs shows visibly intoxicated, slurring lyrics, forgetting words to her own songs mid-verse. Fans who paid to see her sing instead watch her struggle to stand upright at the microphone. In 2008, Blake was sentenced to prison for an unrelated assault charge stemming from a bar fight. While he's inside, Amy visits regularly, writing him letters and appearing at hearings. But the relationship keeps deteriorating from a distance. They divorce in 2009. Amy later says leaving Blake was one of the only decisions she made in those years that she's genuinely proud of. A rare moment of clarity in a period she otherwise describes as a blur. But by then, the addiction has outlived the relationship that triggered it. Amy is in and out of rehab multiple times through the mid-2000s, most of it against her own wishes. Her label pushes her toward treatment. Her father, in a decision he later regrets publicly and repeatedly, initially tells her she doesn't need to go. A moment that becomes one of the most quoted father-daughter dynamics in modern pop culture, and one Amy herself references directly in the lyrics of Rehab itself. She does eventually enter treatment repeatedly over the following years. None of it holds for long. Amy cycles through sobriety and relapse, canceling tour dates on short notice, walking off stage mid-performance, and becoming a fixture of British tabloid coverage not for her music, but for her decline. Paparazzi camp outside her house for months at a time, photographing her at her lowest. In 2011, Amy attempted a European tour, her first significant run of shows in years. Her first stop is Belgrade, Serbia. She arrives on stage visibly unable to perform. She forgets lyrics, wanders the stage without direction, and at points appears to simply stop singing altogether while the crowd boos and jeers. Footage of the performance spreads internationally within hours, framed by outlets as evidence that Amy's career, and possibly her life, is nearing its end. The remaining tour dates were canceled days later. It's the last time most of the world sees Amy Winehouse perform live. Critics and fellow musicians respond to the Belgrade collapse with a mix of concern and, in some corners of the press, open mockery. Tabloids run stills from the show under headlines mocking her appearance and behavior, rather than treating it as what people closer to her recognize it as: a visible medical and psychological crisis, playing out in real time in front of paying customers and a global audience watching clips within the hour. Between the Belgrade show and her death, Amy tries to get sober one more time. Friends say she manages 90 days without alcohol, the longest stretch she'd had in years, and that she seems, briefly, like she's turning a corner. She spends time with her goddaughter, who by all accounts brings out a calmer, more present version of Amy than the one the public usually sees. She talks about writing new music. She talks about the future, about touring again properly, about getting back into the studio. Then, on the night of July 22nd, 2011, Amy is at her home in Camden. Her security guard, who checks on her periodically through the night as part of his usual routine, notices nothing unusual when he looks in on her in the early hours. When he checks again later that morning, she's unresponsive. Paramedics are called. Amy is pronounced dead at the scene. She's 27 years old. The initial cause of death is inconclusive, pending toxicology. When the full inquest results come back months later, the coroner rules that Amy died of accidental alcohol poisoning. Her blood alcohol level measured at more than 5 times the UK legal driving limit. After months of sobriety, she'd relapsed, and her body could no longer tolerate the amount of alcohol she used to be able to handle. It's a detail that turns her death from expected into specifically avoidable. Not the overdose everyone had braced for, but a drinking relapse that outpaced a body no longer built for it. Amy becomes the 5th widely known musician to die at 27, joining Jimi Hendrix, Janis Joplin, Jim Morrison, and Kurt Cobain in what the press quickly dubs, once again, the 27 Club. Her death triggers a wave of tributes across the music industry. Artists she'd influenced and artists who'd influenced her speak publicly about her talent and her struggle in the same breath, rarely separating the two, because for Amy, they were never really separate. Tony Bennett, who recorded a duet with her shortly before her death, later says it's one of the saddest sessions he's ever been part of, watching someone that talented in that much visible pain. Her father, Mitch Winehouse, channels his grief into the Amy Winehouse Foundation, a charity focused on supporting young people dealing with addiction, low self-esteem, and the kinds of pressures that pushed his daughter toward drugs in the first place. Since its founding, the foundation has funded treatment programs, school outreach, and housing support for people in recovery. The kind of structural help Amy herself never fully got in time, delivered years too late for her, but not for the people it now reaches. In 2015, the documentary Amy was released, built almost entirely from home video and unseen footage of her life before fame. Much of it shot by friends and family, with no idea it would ever be public. It won the Academy Award for Best Documentary Feature. For many people, it's the first time they see Amy, not as a tabloid headline, but as a teenager who loved jazz, wrote constantly, and wanted, more than anything, to just make music without the rest of it attached. Back to Black remains one of the best-selling albums in UK chart history. Critics who reviewed her at the time, and critics who've revisited her work since, tend to land on the same comparison: that Amy sang like a jazz vocalist from a much earlier era, dropped into a 2000s pop landscape that had no real precedent for her. She wasn't chasing vocal runs or technical showiness. She was chasing phrasing, the space between notes, the way a line could sound almost spoken and still land harder than something belted. It's the quality that made Back to Black feel timeless the moment it came out, and it's the quality most often cited by the artists who point to her as an influence. Amy Winehouse spent 6 years as one of the most famous people in Britain, and almost none of that time seemed to make her happy. What made her happy, by every account from the people who knew her, was a room, a guitar, and nobody watching. For more stories of brilliant, flawed people and their work, subscribe.